Welcome. My name is Holly Heller-Ross. As this year's chair of the MLK Commission, it is my pleasure to welcome you all to our 2021 celebration. This is our first broadcast celebration in this year of the COVID-19 pandemic. The idea was Maxine Perry's, and the Commission members immediately saw its value in keeping everyone safe. And we appreciate the support and assistance of Mountain Lake PBS and Tom Halleck in making this happen. We hope that you will be inspired and encouraged by the words and the music that are offered, and we sincerely hope that you are all safe and will remain healthy or will recover from any illness or hardship that you are facing. Our founding member, Jacqueline Creed Archer, was engaged in civil rights activism before and while living in Plattsburgh since 1962. Jackie passed away in 2001, but her legacy lives on in this celebration. Jackie was named an African American of distinction by then Governor Mario Cuomo and was a prominent member of the Plattsburgh community. A little background on Martin Luther King and Martin Luther King Jr. Day. It's an American federal holiday marking the birthday of Martin Luther King Jr. King was the chief spokesman for nonviolent activism in the civil rights movement, which successfully protested racial discrimination in federal and state law. The campaign for a federal holiday in King's honor began soon after his assassination in 1968. President Ronald Reagan signed the holiday into law in 1983, and it was first observed 3 years later. It was officially observed in all 50 states for the first time only in the year 2000. According to the King Center, drawing inspiration from both his Christian faith and the peaceful teachings of Mahatma Gandhi, Dr. King led a nonviolent movement in the late 1950s and 60s to achieve legal equality for African Americans in the United States. While others were advocating for freedom by any means necessary, including violence, Martin Luther King Jr. used the power of words and acts of nonviolent resistance, such as protests, grassroots organizing, and civil disobedience, to achieve seemingly impossible goals. And he went on to lead similar campaigns against poverty and international conflict, always maintaining fidelity to his principles that men and women everywhere, irregardless of color or creed, are equal members of the human family. Celebrating this special person is our reason for gathering here today. We need to keep encouraging one another to keep striving towards the goals of justice and truth and powerful nonviolent action in support of our common humanity on this day and throughout the year. This celebration is intended to honor the life and legacy of Martin Luther King Jr., yes. And it is intended to refresh and renew our community so that our commitment to social justice and equality for all will remain shining across the community every day. And actions are as important as words. So in addition to whatever actions you take as an individual to support equality, please also consider supporting our scholarship fund to help local high school graduates attend college. And please help our community through a donation to the Plattsburgh Interfaith Food Pantry.
Whether you came upon this program by purpose or by chance today, I am glad that you are here. One of my favorite events in our community annually is when the commission pulls our community together to understand the values that we must cloak ourselves in, that we truly must embrace daily, Today also typically starts off, though, with a service project down at the Trinity Soup Kitchen. A group of individuals for more years than I can count have been collecting, gathering, and cleaning the Trinity Soup Kitchen because today is also a National Day of Service. Something that first called me to Dr. King's work was the fact that anybody can serve. I don't mean as an elected official, I don't mean in an official title or capacity, but as a member of a community. You can step forward, you can lean in, and you can serve. The unfortunate part of it is COVID-19 is challenging so many things in our daily livings and beings this year. What I think has become more critical and more important is that we've understood or begun to understand that service is something that needs to be done every day, not just on one day. Last year, I stood here with you and I asked, what would you do in between these bookends of time? So my question to those of you that are returning, what have you done over this last year to be of service to our community, to our region, to the nation, and to the globe? For those of you that are here for the first time, the question is, what will you do? Who will you be? How will you be of service to others? We have a great opportunity to give thanks to so many essential workers. I don't speak with rose-colored glasses. We have many challenges that still face us. And the magnifying glass has highlighted so many inequities that we have had for many, many, many years. But a new understanding is before us. One path forward to healing is through service. So I hope that you will find a way to get involved, be it through food drives, coat drives, coalitions. There is a place for you to lean in, to be of service, and to change the world with your voice, and as Dr. King so graciously and so tenderly taught us, with heart and mind. So be of service, be safe, be kind, be well.
Hello, my name is Alex Nieti. I'm the president at SUNY Plattsburgh, and it's my pleasure to welcome you to this year's virtual Martin Luther King Jr. celebration. I began my time as president at SUNY Plattsburgh 1 year ago by attending the MLK event here in the Newman Center on January the 20th. That was my very first official function as president of the college. I recall vividly the energy, the spirit, and the incredible fellowship of those in attendance. It was a wonderful welcome for Andrea and I as we joined the community. However, the level of welcomeness is not felt by everyone. It is not the daily reality for many Black or other people of color in this community. As I've said before, that should bother us and move us to take action. That is why it is so important to remember and recognize the phenomenal legacy of Martin Luther King. He was the voice of the civil rights movement. Martin Luther King led a transformational movement that advocated for equal rights for all. This movement continues today as communities like our Plattsburgh community strive towards inclusivity and the ensuring of equitable outcomes for all. This is important work. Martin Luther King once said, "The ultimate measure of a man or a woman is not where they stand in moments of comfort and convenience, but where they stand at times of challenge and controversy." So only when we depart from our positions of comfort and convenience do we truly honor the legacy of Martin Luther King and do the necessary work to achieve equity and strive towards justice. Thank you again for being here this year. It's my honor to be with you.
In biblical times, there were men and women who called us to reckoning, who called society to be the best that it could be, who looked at the ills of society and called on the mighty and the meek to mend their ways. We called these men and women prophets. In contemporary America, we tend not to use the word prophet. We speak of statesmen, of inspirations, of those who shape the world who call us to make this world a better place. And yet I think that in naming Martin Luther King Jr. as prophet, we do no disservice to those who came before him. Today, more than ever, we are called to follow in his path that he laid out for us. We are called to make this country a more perfect union. We are called to engage in making this world a more equitable place.
Lift every voice and sing till earth and heaven rings with a harmony of liberty. Let all rejoicing rise high as the listening skies. Let it resound loud as the rolling seas. Sing a song full of the faith that the dark past has taught us. Sing a song full of the hope that the present has brought us. Facing the rising sun of a new day begun, let us march on till victory is won. God of a weary years, God of our silent tears, thou who hast brought us far along the way, thou who hast by thy might led us into the light, keep us forever in the path we pray. Sing a song full of the faith that the dark past has taught us. Sing a song full of the hope that the present has brought us. Facing the rising sun of a new day begun, let us march on till victory is won.
So when I think about Dr. King, I often think about, well, what is a legacy? Like, what is a legacy defined? And when I consider the legacy that Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. left, I often think about the civil rights movement and the message of his sermon. But let's not forget that legacy of service. the legacy of social justice, his advocacy for workers' rights, for fair and equal vote, and for fair and equal housing. And when we ask, well, what is a legacy? We also have to consider that legacy as our inheritance. So for me, it's not enough to just take a look at what Dr. King did in the very short time that he was here. It's very much also up to us to continue that fight, to continue that legacy as an inheritance, to carry that mantle of social justice, to continue the fight for equal and fair treatment for everybody. It very much is up to us to create our own legacy based on that inheritance.
Hello everyone, Billy Jones here, Assembly Member from the 115th District. And today, Martin Luther King Jr. Day, we usually do a day of service. We get together at the Trinity Church and clean the kitchen down there. And this year, obviously, looks a little different. And then we would go to the Newman Center and celebrate Martin Luther King Jr.'s life with community members and celebrate his message of giving back to the community and unity and openness for all here in the North Country. And communities all across the United States are celebrating what the wonderful legacy of Martin Luther King Jr. was and continues to be. So on this Martin Luther King Jr. Day, I challenge people to get out there and do that day of service, remember his legacy, and hopefully we'll get through this, and next year will look a little different and we'll be together celebrating his wonderful legacy.
Good afternoon. It is with great humility that I thank the organizing committee for their inclusive invitation to speak on this special day. I'm not charging a speaking fee, so there's a good chance they will get their money's worth. Today, we celebrate the life of a man who was stolen from us at age 39. In his short lifetime, Dr. King challenged the racial caste system and brought to light how millions of Americans were living. As a white man, I realized I could mistakenly say something that proves insensitive, but for me, a bigger mistake would be to say nothing. Currently, with the dark stains of America's past and present so visible, there is much to talk about. I knew I would talk about Dr. King. I was also asked to talk about some of my experiences. I envisioned possibly talking about other relevant topics like the pandemic disproportionately affecting Black and brown people, displaying the systemic inequity of healthcare, the importance of studying America's history, how the words of white people can sometimes be perceived, criminal justice system reform, police accountability, white privilege, Black Lives Matter, and political influence. But lucky for you, I was told to try to keep it to around 15 minutes. I don't speak today presuming I understand the experience of Black Americans. I don't have the sense of the racial trauma that goes through Black people's minds when watching their unarmed Black brothers and sisters' lives being taken, watching Ahmaud Arbery being hunted and killed like an animal, watching an unarmed George Floyd having the life squeezed out of him by a white cop kneeling on his neck, watching Breonna Taylor, an innocent young woman, being indiscriminately killed by police while in her bed, and watching Elijah McClain, a shy, frail, 140-pound young man, being put in a chokehold and given ketamine, dying 5 days later, must be not only abhorrent, but also spine-chilling. The killings in 2020 did take the lid off for many white people, bringing some empathy, but violent deaths are what Black people have lived for years. There's a chronicle of Black names killed year after year. Southern cops brutalized Black bodies during the 1960s in the heat of the night. Now it's done anywhere in the light of the day. Today's celebration follows a year of political chaos, demonstrations, and riots. Riots don't necessarily stem from one killing, as horrific and sickening as each one is. They also come from the accumulation of hurt around inequality of social justice, housing, economic opportunity, education, and healthcare. In 1967, Dr. King said, "A riot is the language of the unheard." An understanding of America's history and culture improves our ability to understand one another and can lead to important, albeit difficult, conversations. While it is each individual's decision whether to study the history of slavery and racism, We should all feel an obligation to do so. We bear a responsibility to accept facts that are inconvenient. When we are uncomfortable, we can grow by actively sharing, listening, and consciously working together for progress. Dr. King said, "There's some good in the worst of us and some evil in the best of us. When we discover this, we are less prone to hate our enemies." I was asked to share some of my background. My experiences don't make me noteworthy, but they do contribute to who I am. I have always been curious about human thoughts and behaviors. My curiosity extends to distilling facts. I consider myself lucky to have come of age in 1967 when I headed for college. The late 60s were turbulent times. I was impacted by the 1967 race riots in northern cities, by the assassinations of Martin Luther King and Bobby Kennedy, and by the war in Vietnam. Those years sparked my curiosity and helped shape my values. I'm proud my core values have changed very little in 50 years. I started my human services career in 1977, spending 4 transformative years working in the heart of Harlem. The office was at 55 West 125th Street, just 2 blocks from the Apollo Theater. I was one of a handful of white employees in an office of 180. It was an immersion-style exposure to Black and Hispanic cultures and a firsthand experience of being in a minority. While in that minority, working with 175 Black and brown people, I was never told that I had to work twice as hard for half as much. My work in Harlem was with SSI, the Public Assistance Program for the Aged, Disabled, and Blind. The office on 125th Street had 25,000 recipients in its service area. I had never been exposed to such poverty and illness. I could look out the 6-story window and see the back of the 4-story brownstones on 126th Street. They looked like the bombed-out ruins of London after World War II. Baldwin also wrote, "Anyone who has struggled with poverty knows how extremely expensive it is to the poor." 40 years ago, I walked 125th Street every day for 4.5 years, often not seeing another white face. It is vastly different now. The much-needed urban renewal turned into gentrification. The historic center of Black culture was trampled, resulting in a loss of history and community. It was done using a top-down approach, a charade of public participation, which left many Harlem residents feeling disempowered and angry. Once again, a Black neighborhood did not oversee their own destiny. Must have been so frustrating as people realized that the long-awaited improvements were not meant for them, but instead aimed to move them out. I loved working in Harlem. I had a wife and 4 children aged 2 to 8 living there, but 2 sets of grandparents and a lot of other family living here. Eventually, I transferred back to Plattsburgh. I guess you might call it a group decision. I want to be clear. I don't believe working in Harlem made me any better or smarter than anyone else. It was an experience along life's journey that I was fortunate to have. The last 17 years of my human services career was spent as commissioner of the Clinton County Department of Social Services. I had the opportunity to help people improve their lives every day. I also had the chance to inspire 175 employees to do the same by instilling values within the organization. Again, it was another challenge and experience along life's journey that I cherished. I think at this point I've used the I word enough during that experiential digression, so let me get back to Dr. King. He was a leader who had seismic impact. He was intelligent, immensely powerful, possessing strong verbal ability and reasoning skills. Dr. King was a man of self-confidence and possessed unmatched determination and courage. He had a natural genius about people, and his nonviolent work towards equality had a prodigious impact on America. However, to many white people, Dr. King is seen as a mainstream portrayal of a saint of deliverance, like Moses, who led his people to freedom. In this historical interpretation, Dr. King saved both Black and white Americans from the evils of segregation while overcoming the resistance of a few powerful individuals with little more than dignified protests and the strength of his convictions. Too often, the power of that simplistic legacy is used to minimize the systemic violence of racism and to characterize the work of his life as complete instead of incomplete. Rather than shining a light on the way our society has fallen short of its incredible promise, past and present, the brilliance of Dr. King's aspirations is used to make invisible the perpetrators of common violence and the disparities in income, housing, justice, and mortality that have become no less acute with time. To me, that is whitewashing his legacy. We need to be careful that Dr. King's sentiments of love, peace, and unity do not transform into excuses for ignoring hatred, injustice, and oppression. Loving our enemies cannot become a commandment to forgive all trespasses. There's a saying in some black church communities about folks who ignore the pain and anger still brewing in oppressed community. It goes like this: everybody want to go to heaven, but don't nobody want to die. We need heroes of all colors. Dr. King's work confronting the injustices of Jim Crow laws starting in 1955 is well known. As you know, the above mentioned were state and local laws that enforced racial segregation in the South during the late 19th and early 20th centuries. They were passed by white legislatures to disenfranchise and remove political and economic gains made by black people during the Reconstruction period. This separate but equal legal doctrine regarding racial segregation for education, public places, public transportation, restrooms, restaurants, and drinking fountains institutionalized the economic, educational, and social disadvantages for African Americans in the South. Regrettably, Jim Crow laws were upheld by the Supreme Court in 1896. Among the many gains achieved by Dr. King and his followers were a significant Supreme Court decision and two major pieces of legislation stemming from specific events. A speech could be given about each. I only have time to highlight them, and most of you know the details. You know about the 1955 Montgomery bus boycott in Rosa Parks, another hero. Dr. King led 382 days of the boycott of public buses. He was beaten, arrested, and his home was bombed. The boycott directly resulted in a 1956 Supreme Court ruling which made segregation on public buses unconstitutional. You know about the 1963 protests in Birmingham to pressure business leaders to open employment to all races and end segregation in public facilities. Students trained in nonviolence participated by taking peaceful walks, 50 at a time, from the 16th Street Baptist Church to City Hall. There was vile television footage and pictures in Life magazine of the police, led by Bull Connor, using high-pressure hoses and police dogs on the marchers, including the children. Over 1,000 children were arrested and jailed. Dr. King was denied all rights and jailed, where he wrote the essay, Letter from a Birmingham Jail, still a recommended reading 57 years later. Despite what transpired, the use of children, the bombing of homes, the bombing of the hotel where Dr. King stayed, the bombing of the 16th Street Baptist Church by the KKK, tragically killing 4 young black girls, Birmingham was considered one of the most successful campaigns of the civil rights era in terms of its influence on national affairs. The direct result was the passage of the Civil Rights Act of 1964. It applied to the entire nation, prohibiting racial discrimination in employment and in access to public places. In the summer of 1963, Dr. King led the March on Washington for Jobs and Freedom, where in front of 250,000 people, he delivered his most famous I Have a Dream speech. Dr. King became Time Magazine Man of the Year in 1963, and in 1964, he became the youngest male recipient, and still is, of the Nobel Peace Prize. Dr. King and the Southern Christian Leadership Conference were called to Selma in 1965 to lead voting rights protests. Despite 30% of the population of Selma being black, 99% of the registered voters were white, with just 1% black. On March 7th, the first attempted walk from Selma to Birmingham across the Edmund Pettus Bridge was led by John Lewis and Hosea Williams, another hero. That day became known as Bloody Sunday. The beatings and incarcerations were so significant, it led President Johnson to intervene. That allowed Dr. King to lead a prearranged symbolic second march to the barricades crossing the bridge, followed by a third 5-day successful march from Selma to Birmingham. The direct result was President Johnson signing the Voting Rights Act on August 6th of that year. That passage in 1965 was the end of Jim Crow laws, at least legally, after 10 years of work. Unfortunately, in 2013, a 5-4 Supreme Court decision gutted much of the 1965 Voting Rights Act. That opened a floodgate, allowing many changes in southern states. By 1966, the sphere of Dr. King's activism went far beyond civil rights and into economic justice and the Vietnam War. In May of 1967, he addressed the Hungry Club Forum, which began as a secret initiative of the Butler Street YMCA in Atlanta. It was a place where sympathetic white politicians could meet out of the public eye with local black leaders. Dr. King spoke about the three major evils he saw in the world: the evil of racism, the evil of poverty, and the evil of war. He opposed the Vietnam War, for he knew it was taking money and resources that could have been spent on social welfare at home. He stated, "A nation that continues year after year to spend more money on military defense than on programs of social uplift is approaching spiritual death." Dr. King's war opposition cost him a significant support among white allies, including Lyndon Johnson, Billy Graham, union leaders, and powerful publishers. Making the point that the civil rights movement wasn't over, he said these clear-sighted words: "It is now a struggle for genuine equality on all levels, and this will be a much more difficult struggle. You see, the gains of the first era of struggle were obtained from the power structure at bargain rates. It didn't cost the nation anything to integrate lunch counters. It didn't cost the nation a penny to integrate hotels and motels. It didn't cost the nation a penny to guarantee the right to vote. Now we are in a period where it will cost the nation billions of dollars to get rid of poverty, to get rid of slums, to make quality integrated education a reality. This is where we are now. Now we're going to lose some friends." Dr. King clearly saw the future. Let us not forget that at the time of his death, Dr. King was considered radical and was one of the most reviled men in the United States. Polls showed 75% of Americans disapproved of him. He was beaten, stabbed, jailed 29 times, and ultimately assassinated at 39 years old, leaving a widow and 4 children. He was killed because he dared to go against the status quo and lived a life that mirrored his beliefs. The sanitizing of Dr. King's legacy makes it easier for the people with power and privilege just to apologize for slavery, rather than doing something to repair the harm caused by it that persists to this day. Our duty calls for us to embrace the hard truths and fight so that those around us, young and old, understand the complexity of racism and the backbreaking work of equity for all. Everyone's work is important. The quote of Dr. King that I use as a reminder for myself is, "Not only will we have to repent for the sins of the bad people, but also for the appalling silence of the good people." I reinforce that with a quote from the late, great John Lewis, another hero, who said, "When you see something that is not right, not fair, not just, you have to speak up. You have to say something, you have to do something." The work is not done. We need more heroes. If you believe in these ideals, please actualize them. Silence is unacceptable. Do something, say something. If need be, educate yourself on systemic racism and take a deep, honest self-inventory. It has been my privilege. Thank you.
Hi, everyone. My name is Nikki Hilton Patterson, and I am the director for the Adirondack Diversity Initiative. And I am very honored to be here to remember and remind us about the legacy of Martin Luther King, Jr. I've been ruminating for several days about the power and the meaning of redemptive love, right? Martin Luther King used the idea and the argument for redemptive love throughout his time, throughout the civil rights movement. And I thought about whether or not redemptive love has any relevance, importance, and meaning today. We have twin peaks of oppressions that we're working through. COVID has transformed our lives. It's transformed the way we interact. It's transformed the way we build relationships, the way we form coalitions, the way we speak to each other, the way we share, the way we care. But most of all, it's transformed the way we love. COVID has also exposed inequities in our country. the richest and largest economy in the world, is the most unequal and inequitable in the world. And COVID, and the rigors and strictures of COVID, has exposed and brought all of that to the fore. Racial injustice, racial reckoning, has risen to the fore as well. Now, how can we learn? How can we use? How can we evoke? How can we return to Martin Luther King's idea, notion of redemptive love? What does it mean? And how can we use it to inspire across differences so that we can come back and build back, not a return to the days of old when we were tied to policies and practices, but build back in a way that speaks to redemptive love, the kind of redemptive love that Martin Luther King expressed, talked about, lived by, even as he was angry, even as he was imprisoned multiple times. The redemptive love that King spoke about was about transformation, was about hope, was about the Black Jeremiah that called on America to keep its promise to its people. Now, I want to take a minute, and I'm just going to read from King, one of King's sermons, where he talks about redemptive love. King said, "We must discover the power of love, the redemptive power of love. And when we do that, we will make of this old world a new world, for love is the only way. Love is creative and redemptive. Love builds up and unites. Hate, on the other hand, tears down and destroys. The aftermath of fight and fire method, which you suggest is bitterness and chaos, the aftermath of the love method is reconciliation and creation of the beloved community. Physical force can repress, restrain, coerce, destroy, but it cannot create and organize anything permanent. Only love can do that. Yes, love, which means understanding, creating redemptive goodwill, even for one's enemies, is the solution to the race problem. The solution to the race problem. It's 2021, and I'm still talking about the race problem. But now we understand that race, in and of itself, is compounded by the intersections of class, nationality, and other social constructs in our lives. Race intersects with all of these other social categories to inform and define how we experience this America. And so I want to challenge everyone to consider returning to and sitting with and meditating on King's rhetoric, King's hope, King's dream of a redemptive love sweeping this nation. How do we do that? How do we remain vigilant? How do we remain committed to the legacy of redemptive love that King spoke of? We understand that redemptive love is transformative. Redemptive love is kind. Redemptive love is long-suffering, right? We understand that in 2021, going through both COVID and a racial reckoning, we need patience. Those of us, we who are Black and brown and other, we who are gay, lesbian, trans being, we who are immigrants, we who are differently abled, we understand that change is life. And a lot of times, change takes lifetimes. As a scholar activist who've been doing community work since I was 10 years old with my Rastafarian father in Jamaica, I understand that I am benefiting. I'm standing here with you right now, because of the work that many did before me who are not here to benefit from this today. Change, struggle, mobilization, redemption is multi-generational. So I'm asking you today, on this very sacred day, when we remember the legacy of Martin Luther King, who himself, he called himself imperfect as we are. But what we can do is invoke redemptive love today. What aspects of that? Patience, kindness, and transformational justice. You want to live King's redemptive love? Go out and do something. When you see something, say something. When you see abuse, speak up. When you see injustice, speak out. My friends, my family members of whiteness, the most important time for you to speak and make yourself known and to speak up and to use your privilege and your power and your dominance is when the cameras are off. It's when no one's around and no one's looking. When you stand up for, stand up with, and decenter yourselves so that someone else feels that love. Go out there today and speak with those you disagree with, because they deserve that redemptive love too. We all do. We cannot do this alone. And so on this day, I thank you for having me, and I'm especially glad to be here. I'm especially glad to be here because I am here because of King's redemptive love. Because redemptive love never gives up. It is long-suffering. It gets angry. It gets indignant. But it keeps going. Because transformational justice is all that matters. So on this day, this most sacred of days, that we remember the legacy of Martin Luther King, the soul that gave his life for us to be here, the soul that gave his life so that I could be here. I want to encourage you to invoke redemptive love and all that it means in 2021. Thank you.
Hi everyone, my name is Sue Ann Dunn, and I'm very happy to be a part of this celebration with you today. I am one of the recipients of the Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. Commission Scholarship from 2003. A sentiment that best describes my view of life is that all journeys have a secret destination in which the traveler is unaware. The journey to where I am today has proved itself both unpredictable and purposeful. So, luckily for me, I've recognized that my main purpose is to positively affect the lives of youth, no matter where life's journey takes me. As you listen to my message today, I encourage you all to take some time, think about what your purpose in life is, or even what it could be. That way, as your journey continues, there will be something constant for you to strive for, even when you aren't sure of what to do next. Being an immigrant and part of the first generation to accomplish many things here in the U.S., I did my best to always find ways to help my mother as soon as I had the ability to. The Dr. Martin Luther King Scholarship has helped to alleviate a portion of the financial hardship on my mother, who at the time had 2 children in college. Going into college, there were many things that I was extremely naive about, which included the cost of books. I found out sooner than later that I probably should have applied to way more scholarships in high school. I was very grateful to receive the Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. Scholarship when I did. It helped to cover the cost of my textbooks for the 2nd semester while away at Geneseo. Here is a little bit more about my background to help you to gain further understanding as to how meaningful scholarship funds, organized sports, and nonprofit endeavors are, especially to those in underserved communities. I'm originally from Jamaica, West Indies, and when I was a child, my family and I immigrated to the U.S. and lived in Brooklyn, New York. I attended elementary school there and spent my evenings at the Madison Boys and Girls Club. I remember playing bumper pool, board games, singing karaoke, and most importantly, getting help with my homework. Those are all things that I still currently enjoy, minus having the bumpers in pool, and now homework is work. So when I was in 6th grade, my mother moved us to Plattsburgh, New York in hopes for a new beginning, and boy, did it prove to be that indeed. She spent the first 2 days trying to convince me that that small looking office building on Broad Street was in fact the middle school where I'd be attending. It was very difficult at first because I felt like an outsider. Unfortunately, that feeling was maintained throughout my time at Safford and throughout my time at Plattsburgh High School. There were only a handful of black students, and the social pressure to be like everyone else was strong. It was a continuous fight to remind myself that I was just fine being who I was, even when others were constantly reminding me that I was different because of the color of my skin. Like Dr. King and many others, I always believe that knowledge is something that no one can take away from you, no matter what. So I went on a journey to always constantly seek knowledge because I found that helped me to combat feelings of inferiority that was gained from outside forces. I prided myself on being a good person and a good student. One that always made sure to treat everyone well, even when those actions weren't returned to me. I was an excellent student athlete who always maintained my joy for organized sports, despite comments throughout the years that alluded that my talents were attributed to the color of my skin. So thanks to the positive support and reassurance from my mother, coaches, teachers, my church, and other nonprofits, I was able to get a strong start to the path that helped me to be where I am today. I believe that individuals could do anything if they were provided with access to said opportunity. I now have a bachelor's degree in interpersonal and organizational communication from the State University of Geneseo and an MBA degree focused in human resource management from Walden University. I am currently an analyst at Goldman Sachs in their National Tax Group, which is located in the Capital Region of New York, and I also manage the internship within my department. I volunteer frequently with my company in efforts to teach financial literacy to individuals in underserved communities. I am very purposeful with the initiatives that I participate in because I want to show others positive representations of themselves. So as Dr. Martin Luther King said, our lives begin to end the day that we become silent about the things that matter. I will always keep doing what I can do to help young people to succeed on a journey that they never even saw coming. So as you go forward in these trying times, I challenge you all to walk forth in your purpose and do what matters most, especially when it comes down to helping your community. Thank you.
Hello, my name is Janice Tobin. I'm the treasurer for the Martin Luther King Commission. I'd like to lead you in the community pledge. Martin Luther King Jr. lived among us as an agent for justice, love, and peace. As we remember him today, let each of us, as individuals and as a community, renew our commitment and dedication to practice fairness, love, and mercy towards strangers, and to be at peace with all people. In the words of Dr. King, we are simply seeking to bring into full realization the American dream, a dream yet unfulfilled, a dream of equal opportunity, or privilege and property widely distributed, a dream of a land where people no longer argue that the color of a person's skin determines the content of his or her character, the dream of a land where everyone will respect the dignity and worth of human personality. This is the dream. Let us have compassion for all people who live with injustice, terror, disease, and death as their constant companions. We are sisters and brothers. We are responsible one for the other. May we strive for justice and peace among all people and respect the dignity of every human being. May we always remember, when one suffers, we all suffer. As the Reverend Dr. King has said, if we are to speed the coming of the new age, we must have the moral courage to stand up against injustice wherever we find it. Let us go forth with a resolute spirit to see and do justice. Amen.
Justice. We refuse to believe that the Bank of Justice is bankrupt. We refuse to believe that there are insufficient funds in the vaults of opportunity of this nation. We've come to cash a check that will give us upon demand the riches of freedom and security of justice. We've also come to this hallowed spot in America of the fierce urgency of now. Now is not the time to engage in the luxury of cooling off or take the tranquilizing drug of gradualism. Now is the time to make the real promise of democracy. Now is the time to rise from the dark, desolate valley of segregation to the sunlit path of racial justice. Now is the time to lift our nation from the quicksand of racial injustice to the solid rock of brotherhood. This is the light of justice.
Y'all recording? Yeah! 1, 2, ready, go!
lift every voice